Have you heard that Jesus could heal blindness? Have you heard that? Have any of you heard that story, that Jesus could heal people who were blind? Have you heard this? I can't tell from your reactions.
Yes.
Good. Okay, so I don't have to go through that. Well, okay, it's there. It's mentioned in the Bible numerous times. It's in each one of the 4 Gospels has a story of Jesus healing someone who was blind, and Matthew tells 4 different stories about it. All of them tell at least one story. So this idea that Jesus can heal the blind is absolutely part of the reading of the Scriptures, of the Gospel, of the faith that we have passed down for all these years. It was something, can you imagine, to see people. I saw on 60 Minutes last Sunday night the story of 2 physicians who have developed a very quick technique for removing cataracts, and they are traveling all over the world, and they have cured by themselves over 150,000 cases of blindness in the third world, where they have gone in and sometimes do up to 15 surgeries in an hour. And when they take the bandages off the person the next day and they can see, not just their eyes fill with light, but their faces and their bodies fill with light. People who had sometimes been blind since they were teenagers are now able to see again. So we can imagine the same thing with Jesus when people were healed from blindness, that the same idea that they were suddenly brought into the light, and in every way that they were filled with light. It's really simple to understand that Jesus was not just healing people's eyes, but he was healing their souls. In fact, isn't that really kind of the point of these stories being included, that Jesus was healing spiritual blindness? He was not just healing people who couldn't see physically, but he was trying to reach out to people who could not see spiritually, who couldn't understand anything, who couldn't do too much to improve their faith. Jesus was trying to heal them as well. Maybe that includes us. So, Jesus, we accept this idea that Jesus could heal the blind, but could Jesus heal the bland? Now, if you haven't heard yet, this sermon started with a typographical error. When I was typing something and I typed the phrase, Jesus healed the man born blind, and accidentally typed, Jesus heals the man born bland. And I thought about it, and I thought, we could use a lot of that too. It made me wonder, is blandness an illness? Is it a spiritual matter? Can Jesus, in the same way that healing someone blind is a spiritual matter, could it be that healing someone who is bland is a spiritual matter too? You know, there are some people out there who just kind of white bread, I guess, for a lack of they're not very exciting, and they're not very excited. They're, you know. Thank you. I had other words in here. I don't need them now. These are the people who, paint their living rooms a pale beige color and just kind of fade into the background. The bland. Can bland people be healed from their blandness? Must they be healed? Is blandness a spiritual matter? Well, let me tell you a little bit about the scripture reading for today. How many of you were able to pay attention to that whole thing? Oh, only a few. Okay. But the first one, we read about the importance of spices and perfumes in the world back that time. Remember, it wasn't easy to get them. To get a hold of any kind of spice or perfume was difficult. The only one they had a lot of was salt. So they were able to get salt as much as they needed it. That was a fortunate thing. The significance for this reading from the Gospel of Mark chapter 7 is what happened in chapter 6. You got to go back to chapter 6, and here's what happened in chapter 6. First of all, Jesus has walked out into the countryside with his disciples. He's gone out into the countryside for some rest, but a huge crowd follows him out there, and they gather around, and Jesus begins to talk to them, sits down and talks with them, gives his disciples tasks. They spread out through the crowd, and they pass his word on, and as he talks to them, the day passes on, and eventually they've got a crowd of maybe thousands of people gathered out there in this countryside, where there is nothing to eat. And the people are getting hungry. And Jesus doesn't want to say to them, go to your homes and get something to eat and then come back, because you know what will happen. Like if I said to you today, this sermon is going to be about 7 hours long, so go home and get some lunch and come back. How many of you are coming back? Okay, so Jesus doesn't want to do that either, because even though he can hold the crowd a lot better than I can, he doesn't want to do that. So he tells the disciples to give him some food, and the disciples gather up their food, and what have they got to eat? Who knows? How much have they got? 5 loaves of bread, not loaves of bread, 5 loaves of bread about the size of this, and 2 smoked fish. And what happens? Somehow, everybody eats. Jesus thanks God for it and gives it to the disciples to give to the people, and it doesn't run out. Somehow, they are all able to eat. Nobody has explained it. Nobody can figure it out. Nobody's even sure today what it exactly means, except for the fact that thousands and thousands of people got fed, even though there was very little food to eat them, to feed them with. It's amazing. It's astounding. Now, what happens after that is finally the crowds go home, because now it's night, and Jesus tells his disciples, get in the boat, go to the other side of the lake. There's nobody over there. We'll go over there. We'll rest. But I'm going to stay here for a little while and pray. I'll meet you over there. So the disciples go and they sail across, and as they're sailing across in the middle of the night, they look up and they see something out on the water, and they don't know what it is, but as it gets closer and closer, they can see that it's a human figure, and pretty sure, soon they're sure that a ghost is coming to them, walking on the water. They can't figure out how it is until finally they're terrified, because they think this ghost is coming right toward them, until it gets close enough and they see that it's Jesus. And what has he been doing? He's been walking on top of the water. And the disciples are astounded and amazed and terrified. They have no idea how this could possibly be. But Jesus gets in the boat with them, tells them not to be afraid. They sail to the other side. When they get to the other side, guess what has happened? That crowd of people have walked around the lake and met them there. And Jesus gets out of the boat and he begins to talk to them and teach them. Now, that's what happened. Then we get to chapter 7. And in chapter 7, there are some religious authorities in that crowd that have walked around, and they have a question for Jesus. And here's what their question is. They say, Jesus, how did you manage to feed so many people with so little food? Was this supposed to be a symbol of you being like Moses, who gave manna to the people in the desert? Does that mean that you are like the new Moses, and we're supposed to listen to you and trust in you? Can you help us to understand what all of that means? Because we saw you do this, and we realize God's power must be in you, but we don't understand what it means. Can you help us with that? That's what they asked. No, it isn't. They didn't ask that. They asked this instead. You walked on the water. We heard that you walked on the water. Is that true? Are you like Moses, who divided the Red Sea in half? Is that what you're saying to us? That you're the new Moses and we should follow you and listen to what you have to say because God's power is in you? What does it mean that you have the power to walk on the water? That's what they asked. No, it isn't. What they asked is this. Jesus, why don't your disciples do the ritual hand washing before they eat? That's what they wanted to know. I have been in a similar situation. I have been teaching in a public school, talking about the civil rights movement of the 60s. And I don't want to just give the kids the information. I want them to feel it. I want them to understand, what does it mean to be out there in the middle of this and feel like maybe this is your opportunity to break the chains that have held you for centuries. Maybe this is an opportunity for something real to happen. And I can see the kids are getting it. They're picking it up. They're getting excited. I can see it in their faces. And then little Peter, right in the middle of the room, he raises his hand. And I say, yes, what is it? And he says, can I go to the bathroom? Let me say this. It is not necessarily a sin to be dull, but but sometimes it's a tragedy. Some people are just dull, and all of us are dull sometimes, and it's not a sin to be a quiet or reserved person, but it's not a sin that you are not primarily interested in somebody else talking about international trade policy. It is not a spiritual danger that you can't tell a joke in a way that makes other people laugh. The danger about being dull is that you are hearing and knowing the truth of Jesus Christ and being uninterested or unexcited about it. Can you imagine that? The worst thing you can say to me about my sermon is what? Some of you know. What is it? Oh, you're close, you're close. The word I don't want to hear, and I shouldn't tell you because now everybody's going to say it to me today. The last thing I want to hear you say as you leave church today is, Pastor, that was a lovely sermon. I don't do lovely. If I make a lovely sermon, it's a mistake. I wasn't going for that. I do not do lovely. So please, please, if it is lovely, let me know. I got to change it, okay? The problem with lovely is nice. Lovely is cute. Lovely can be set on a shelf over there, right over there, and you can look at it from time to time and you can go, isn't that lovely? And I don't want to be lovely because I want to get you. I want to get you where you are. I want to hit you in here. I want to do something to make you different, to make you change, to make you feel what the disciples felt when Jesus came walking to them on the water. That's what I want for you. I don't want you to go home and say today, the pastor gave a lovely sermon. It was about Jesus, who's a lovely man. If you are bland to Christ, if Christ is dull, if that's boring to you, then you do not understand. You cannot blandly believe. You can't believe blandly. Belief sets you on fire. Andy, we didn't set you on fire today, but I thought for a minute we were going to when he was standing right in front of the candles there. But I sure would be happy if everybody here today was set on fire by this message of Christ. I have often wondered, how in the world did we take the story of Jesus Christ, who comes to us, who is God among us, who is born in this little country, who raises up followers, who becomes the greatest teacher in the history of the world, who is taken and arrested and put on trial and crucified and buried and dead, and then comes back to life again and still lives today. How did we ever go from that story to sitting in church, bored? How did church get boring? So, consequently, I'm wearing this shirt today because I want you to remember today. I want you to be moved because you really believe. If you are not moved, you don't really believe. I want you to believe. I want you to read the scriptures and hear the sermon and sing the songs. And when it's done, I want you to look up and say, holy stuff! I want it to just knock you over. I want you to feel it. I want you to go, God is love, man. Do you get it? God is like love. Do you get it, man? I mean, I want that kind of thing going on for you. God brought the slaves out of Egypt into freedom and split the Red Sea so they could do it. And God brought Isaiah out and had Isaiah talk to us, even though he suffered terribly for it. Isaiah stood up and told the truth. And then there were these shepherds in the field, and Jesus came, and the whole world changed. Can you feel that? Can you hear that? That's why I wore this shirt today, because I didn't dare to stand up here and be bland today. How am I doing? All right. Don't. I knew it was going to be you, Dennis. So here's how the sermon ends today. So now I got to tell you, I'm going to close with the story about Ray, whose last name, are you ready for this, was Bland. I thought for a while, I was about 12 when I met him, I thought for a while it was B-L-A-N-D, but it turns out it was double N's, but it sounded like they were always talking about Ray Bland. Ray Bland was about this tall, very round, one of those round people, a very small head with a bald head and a big hooked nose. I said to my brother, have you ever seen anybody that looks more like a turtle than Ray Bland does? I was 12, so forgive me, okay? Ray sang in the choir, and he was okay, but not very good. And Ray had never in his life been an exciting or excitable person. He was in some kind of business, I think insurance. I don't know if there's any insurance agents here, please forgive me. He was not an interesting person, but he was a pretty nice guy. Some people even might have said he was a lovely man. This was in the 60s, and do you know what happened in the 60s? Men started to wear dress shirts that were of different colors. They weren't all white. Ray Bland had never worn anything but a white shirt and tie in his life to church. Never, ever, ever. And we started to tease him about it. And he took it really well. And he smiled and he laughed. And one day he showed up wearing a yellow dress shirt under his jacket. And he laughed and laughed about that. And we laughed with him. And Ray got up from time to sing a solo. He would be asked to sing a solo, and he didn't have a great voice. He was just filled in his heart with love of God. And he sang ordinary songs in his not that great voice, and you couldn't help but feel that you were experiencing God's love through the love that Ray Bland had. That we teased him and we called him names and he laughed about it and joked with us, and then just to make us happy bought a couple of red and yellow and blue shirts to wear to church. I loved Ray Bland for that. I love the fact that he was filled with God's love. And I hope we all are touching someone else's life with the love of God through us. Amen. Thank you, Ray.
You've been listening to a sermon by Reverend Stephen Carnahan, pastor of High Street Congregational Church in Auburn, Maine. If you feel inspired by what you hear, we invite you to join us in person for worship services every Sunday morning, beginning at 10 o'clock. Of course, you can always listen to Steve's sermons on the web. New sermons are posted every Monday by midday. Please take a moment to explore this website for more information about our church, or visit our Facebook page at High Street Congregational Church, UCC. We hope that God's presence will be known to you every hour of every day, and that God's blessings will rest upon you now and always. See you next week.